Hello, there I am. We're on. You can hear me. Yes, great. Take this out my ear. Welcome, everyone, to a much delayed episode 8 of Learning About Learning with Jim. You know, stuff happening, life, baby, work, etc. But we're here. We're going to chat about synthetic phonics. An exciting topic for today. This is my question. Using synthetic phonics to teach reading, any good or a waste of time? It's a bit of a departure this week from my normal research, which is into, some of the topics in theory and research around learning in organizations, which is the work I do, working with NGOs, charities, governments to create awesome learning experiences. But phonics is something I used to do quite a bit of work in primary schools. Me and my mate Tim ran a company running kind of big collaborative art workshops in primary schools. So and my dad was a primary school teacher. Then Tim went on to become a primary school teacher. Got a bunch of friends who are or were primary school teachers in the UK. And phonics is it's a big contentious topic, and I didn't really understand what it was, and that's kind of what this side project is all about. It's me learning about learning. So phonics is the thing I'm going to dig into. Apologies if this isn't relevant to you at all. I'll be back next week or next time with something that's more relevant to you organizational facilitators. But yeah, phonics. So if you're like a parent with young kids in the UK or somewhere, I think Australia, New Zealand, Canada, maybe, they've introduced phonics programs as well. This might be interesting for you. And basically what I've tried to do this week is understand what the hell systematic synthetic phonics are, and grasp a little bit the debate around them. Like, are they any good? Are they a waste of time? Spoiler alert, the conclusion is that I think they actually are pretty good. And a lot of the kind of noise about them, anti-phonic stuff, might be just the moaning of kind of uppity middle-class parents. Could be, which would be a shocker, right? Anyway, so synthetic phonics. Let's define our terms first, and if anyone is watching as well, drop a comment in the chat on YouTube or LinkedIn Live. Say hello. Give us your opinions on phonics if you have any. So, systematic synthetic phonics. This came up in the UK, became kind of a big thing. 2006, the Rose Review came out. Which is like a review into education, and it strongly recommended the teaching of reading using systematic synthetic phonics, or not necessarily reading, but decoding. So giving children the ability to decode words, and so we've got two things within systematic synthetic phonics: systematic phonics, which is, quote, well, I couldn't fit this quote on the little ticker thing, the direct teaching of a set of letter-sound relationships in a clearly defined sequence. The set includes the major sound spelling relationships of both consonants and vowels. So they're kind of removing kind of reading books, reading sentences from the picture, and focusing just on these kind of letter-sound relationships. So graphemes and phonemes. Graphemes, how you write a letter. Phonemes, how you write something. Phonemes, how you say something. And there are 44 phonemes in the English language. And so synthetic phonics, another quote here: children learn how to convert letters or letter combinations into sounds, and then how to blend the sounds together to form recognizable words. As part of the decoding process, the reader learns up to 44 phonemes and their related graphemes. So you're learning things like I've got a little quote here. So synthetic phonics, you're learning things like t, p, a, s. So they're the phonemes, the smallest units of sound in the English language, and then they can use those to build up actual words. So those ones, t, p, as, you can make tap, taps, pat, pats, sat. So this is synthetic phonics. This is kind of, and again, I don't know much more detail about this, but that's how it works. And that is where the criticism starts to come in, because you're kind of removing reading, like actual reading and meaning and sense making from the process. You're just focusing on getting kids to like learn how to say the things that they're seeing on the page, like decode the squiggles into sounds, basically. So you got synthetic phonics on one side, and then you've got analytic phonics on the other side, which is where, and another quote here, children learn to analyze letter-sound relationships in previously learned words. They do not produce sounds in isolation. So we're looking at the kind of relationship between the sounds of similar but different words together. So it involves the analysis of whole words to detect phonetic or orthographic, so sound or spelling patterns, then splitting them into smaller parts to help with decoding. So an example here, pat, park, push, pen. So they're kind of similar, phonemically or orthographically similar words. And by analyzing those words, I can understand the patterns. And, if I know that the p is the same on all these words, that's going to help me to say p words out loud. And then I know there's these kind of suffixes that I can put on. That probably isn't even the right word, that have different sounds. And so, I suppose I can I could add a new phoneme to the start of that. So I know pen, but then when a t is at the start, that spells 10. But again, we're talking about not decoding the meaning of the word necessarily, but we're not kind of reading, but we're working out how to turn the squiggles into sounds. That's kind of what we're doing here. And then a subset of analytic phonics, which is this, is something called the onset rhyme method. So, which is here. So you have the first bit of the word, which is the phoneme before the vowel, and then which is the onset, and then the rhyme is everything that comes after and including the vowel. So sn is the onset. Oh, actually, that's two phonemes, isn't it? Sn is the onset, and then ap is the rhyme, and then we can figure out other rhymes for that. So snap, map, tap, clap. And so we're kind of using the kind of linking between words to understand them. So they're the definitions. A cool 8 minutes on definitions, but it's kind of important. I think this thing that I've mentioned already, the central I suppose argument between pro-phonics and anti-phonics folks is that the people who are against systematic synthetic phonics say that it detaches language learning from the meaning of words and the joy of reading and the actual understanding of what you're saying. But the proponents of phonics say that it actually teaches kids to do this, to decode words much faster, which they will need in order to be able to read properly. So it's much slower. If you have to learn every single word by the kind of shape of the word, it's much slower to learn in that way than if you can decode every word and say it out loud and then understand it. Because what's likely to be the case is these young kids, they know how to speak and say many more words than they know how to read. So I think, if I understand it rightly, what phonics is trying to do is get that connection much stronger between the words you know how to say and then actually understanding what word you're reading, which you then can connect to like your internal understanding of the meaning of that word. Whew. All right. So I looked into, might need a little bit of coffee after that. So I looked into a bit of research on this. I really tried to find a balance, some pro, some anti-phonics. Yeah, and you'll see what comes out is actually is fairly balanced, but I kind of think the scales come down more in favor of phonics than anti-phonics. So there's a paper by Dominic Wise and Morag Stiles, Synthetic Phonics and the Teaching of Reading, the Debates Surrounding England's Rose Report. So they say that whilst teachers should provide systematic, direct and explicit phonics instruction so that children master the essential alphabetic code-breaking skills required for foundational reading proficiency, equally, they should also provide an integrated approach to reading that supports development of oral language, vocabulary, grammar, reading fluency, comprehension, and literacies of new technologies. So what these folks are saying is that teaching phonics is really important, and it should be done alongside these other things that are essential for reading and speaking. So oral language, learning grammar, learning vocabulary, reading actual books. And they are quite critical of the rollout of phonics in UK schools, which are now kind of fully bedded in primary curriculum. Everyone has to do them. They conclude that there's little or no evidence that the introduction of phonics has improved performance on any standardized reading outcomes, namely the international standardized tests of PIRLS, PISA, or UK SATs. Which is interesting because another paper I read, I actually tried to I looked into the PISA data, or tried to, and they look at reading comprehension. From what I could see, they look at reading comprehension around age 13, which is much later than, the phonics work's over by then. That 13, they're already in secondary school. So, and what this other paper said, which kind of connects to that, which is called Changing How Literacy is Taught, Evidence on Synthetic Phonics, actually talks about how the biggest effect of phonics teaching is on kids at a very early age. So kids from between like ages 5 to 7, that's when it's really useful. By the age of 7, most kids can kind of read anyway. By the end of primary school, most kids can read, and the impact of phonics teaching has kind of been lost in the data, because like all the kids can read by that point. But it's that first bit, when kids are very young, that phonics does seem to actually be very useful to kind of accelerate their ability to decode words and make sounds at them. So they looked at there was a really there's essentially a really great natural experiment occurred in the UK, where as a result of the Rose Report, phonics was introduced to primary schools all over the country, but it was implemented in the local authorities, which are the kind of areas that actually, I think we're actually mainly talking about England here. The areas that England split up into that have responsibility for a number of schools, like many schools within a specific local authority. And it was introduced into those local authorities at slightly different times. So when they tracked the data, they could see the impact of phonics in those different areas. So they didn't actually have to set up any kind of randomized control trials. They could see what happened in these different areas. Really nice. And what they found, Our empirical analysis shows that intensive training in the use of a new pedagogy produce strong effects for early literacy acquisition amongst young school children. And more specifically, the effects persist for children with a higher initial propensity to struggle with reading. For instance, those from disadvantaged backgrounds and or those who are non-native speakers of English. So I think this is kind of the crucial point here, especially kind of connecting back to who might be complaining about phonics. Is it the kind of privileged middle-class parents who, you know, maybe they have more time to do reading with their kids because they don't have to work two jobs. They're native English speakers, so English is being spoken at home. Their kids come into school with much more literacy and language proficiency than kids who, as it says here, might be from disadvantaged backgrounds or live in a home where they're not speaking English all the time. So I think we just need to kind of be aware of that. That like a lot. I imagine a lot of the kind of hoo-ha around phonics is from it's from those kinds of parents who think that it's kind of a waste of their kids' time and they should just be like being more creatively free, which of course they should, you know, of course that's great, but it seems like phonics is actually incredibly useful for the kids who are a bit behind, but through no fault of their own, but just, you know, through circumstance, which is a very important thing. And their kind of their conclusion: this policy reduced literacy inequalities in primary school at a relatively low cost. So just to reiterate, and I will read a little quote here, they found there to be an instant effect of the phonics program at age 5. These effects persist to age 7. However, most students learn to read eventually. So we don't see any overall effect of the intervention by age 11. So kind of by the time all these kids hit 11, basically all of them can read anyway. But the ones who were kind of behind when they came in were able to learn to read faster because of phonics. And then there are, of course, loads of other benefits to that, because you need to be able to read to do maths, to do science, to do everything else you need to do in school. So there are, whilst they weren't able to kind of study this, they posit that there are likely to be many benefits from these kids learning to read or decode earlier, many knock-on benefits to their education in general. Okay, a couple of minutes to go. I'm going to end with probably the most. So we've gone anti-pro, a bit of anti now. Michael Rosen, the poet, is probably one of the most famous anti-phonics folks. You know, he does a lot of work in schools, helping kids learn how to read and get excited about language and reading and books and poems and yeah, he doesn't really like phonics for I think for kind of two main reasons. One of which we've touched on already, which is that phonics alone, you know, all it's doing is teaching you to decode words. It doesn't teach you about the beauty of language, you know, meaning, understanding a story, that kind of thing. So he says, like, teaching children to read by phonics alone is in essence a means of teaching children how to read out loud. That is the process that's being taught. That is all that phonics on its own can do. And actually, if you look at the national curriculum and the Rose Report, I think, and I'm sure people can correct me on this, it doesn't advocate just using phonics at all. It says you should also teach these other things that we had in the kind of quote above: the development of oral language, vocabulary, grammar, reading, fluency, comprehension, literacies of new technology. You know, that should all be in there. But the problem is that perverse incentives come into play when there is a phonics screening test that all kids have to do. I think they have to do a couple of them throughout their primary education. So the incentives, therefore, are for teachers to kind of teach the test and make sure these kids are going to do well on this phonics check Whereas my understanding is there's less testing around reading comprehension, love of language, that kind of thing. So, teachers are likely to focus on the thing they're being measured on. That's kind of how things work. And, we're all guilty of that to an extent, but that's kind of one of his main criticisms, and kind of connected to that, just to elucidate it, it's quite clearly possible to read some, many, or most words in a text out loud without deriving meaning. I can do that with Italian or German. Absolutely. A basic understanding of how those graphemes are turned into phonemes in another language that uses kind of Roman characters. Similarly, I can decode probably any book in German, make the right sounds, but I wouldn't know the meaning, and that's what he wants to kind of push forward here. Like we should also, once these kids can know how to decode, we should teach them how to understand the meaning of language, because, as Michael Rosen says, we are interested in children becoming readers of real text. And I think his main criticism really is this test I talked about, this phonics screening test, tells children as young as 5 that they have failed at reading. So in his mind, we're failing children if we tell them that young that they're failing at reading because they did badly on this phonics check, which is perhaps not fair to pin that on a child just as a result of some education policy. Whew. Anyway, that is phonics. Unsurprisingly, nobody watching this one, which is absolutely fine. It's been fascinating for me to dig into this, and I think I understand this phonics thing a lot more now. Especially I think, I as a middle class guy was kind of instinctively anti-phonics, sounded like bullshit. But once I dug into a bit more, it seemed like there was strong evidence to suggest that it's actually a good thing in schools. So when our kid goes to school, I'll probably be a little kinder as a parent towards those teachers whilst they're doing this. But the sad thing is, my kid's she's gonna be fine. We've got time and space to be able to read with her, teach her how to read before she gets into school and while she's at school, and not lots of people don't have that privilege and that opportunity. So something like phonics seems to be essential for helping those kids that aren't as privileged or as lucky to catch up. And that's kind of the conclusion. Thank you. Thanks for watching, everyone. Enjoy the sun. If you're in the UK, it's been a rare sunny week. Spring appears to have sprung over here. And wherever else you are in the world, have a nice weekend. Nice to see you all. Ciao. Ciao, ciao, ciao.